Review time. The year is 2056. America is at its most volatile state since 2020, if not more so. The contenders for the presidency are the radical patriot candidate, Tom Clearlake, and his dim-witted vice president, Joseph Capricci, and the soft-spoken socialist candidate, Joseph Palmer, and his relatively unknown vice president, Whitney Delapue. Who wins? Well, Clearlake ends up winning, just barely. However, Clearlake does not get sworn in as the 54th president of the United States. On November 14th, 2056, Clearlake holds a rally in which he is assassinated on live TV. Joseph Capricci, the one who was only supposed to be a political yes man, is now the president-elect, and he chooses none other than Joseph Palmer, a socialist, as his new VP. Capricci's reasoning is that he can help unify the country this way, by balancing the ticket, so to speak. While Clearlake's voters are furious, and Palmer's voters are beyond suspicious of Capricci's motives, and nobody likes Capricci. He has an annoying voice, he stutters, and he's really just another politician that would have been consigned to a footnote in the history books if not for the events that got him to the presidency. So, on January 20th, 2057, Joseph Capricci is sworn in as the 54th President of the United States, along with his Vice President, Joseph Palmer. You may remember that this timeline is called Earth-57, and now we have arrived at the year 2057. What makes 2057 stand out among the rest of the years? What makes it so special? Well, think of 2020, but on steroids, minus the pandemic. Racial tensions spurred on by patriot speeches, class wars spurred on by the socialists, and unrest and uproar in virtually every major city in the country. Blood is being spilled in the streets of Chicago, New York City has seen 2 bombing incidents, and Atlanta has seen straight months of violent marches. Both parties begin to arm themselves. Even Fox News abandons their right-wing president. That's when you know it's bad. On October 23rd, 2057, Capricci travels to his hometown of Cincinnati, Ohio to make a speech. He has requested that the speech be televised on every major channel because it is of the utmost importance to all Americans. With a heavy heart, Capricci begins his speech. In the speech, which becomes known as the Cincinnati Proclamation or the Decree of 2057, Capricci dissolves the United States. The eastern half, where most of the civil unrest has been occurring, is divided into 12 sectors, drawn along state and county lines, based on the general voting trends of those areas over the last several elections. The western U.S. is placed under the jurisdiction of the Provisional Western Authority, or the PWA. Alaska is given temporary independence until they either vote to stay their own nation or reach an agreement with Canada. Hawaii is given the same options. The federal government, in the meantime, cordons off Delaware, Maryland, eastern West Virginia, and northern Virginia to claim as their own. You thought Capricci was stepping down as president? No. He's just severing a small portion of the country and letting the rest go to crap. His thinking is that the sectors will get along now that they're more unified within themselves, and they will all view him as a hero for doing so. And he gets to keep technically ruling the United States in the form of Columbia, the area around DC. Unfortunately, this does not work out the way he thought it would. So, I am going to take you through a day-by-day breakdown of what happens after October 23rd, because the US implodes and there is a lot happening all at once. I'm also going to break it down between the Northeast, the Southeast, and the West. So, here we go, starting with the Southeast. Pretty quickly after the decree, Sector 8's government meets and declares itself to be the Republic of Florida, and they go on their merry way until climate change gives them a reality check a few hundred years down the line. Sector 4, meanwhile, organizes itself into the Second Republic of Texas, placing its capital at Austin. Sector 7, after a lot of deliberation and debate between its constituent states, decides to rebrand itself the New States of America. Of course, there were calls for a second confederacy, but the compromise there was to just include part of the old Confederate flag in the New States' flag, which I'll show later on. There is also a discussion about their official abbreviation, because they don't want it to be NSA and match this big government institution of the old US, so they settle on NUSA. Eventually, they become known simply as NUSA, or the Nusian Republic. By the end of November, Sectors 4 and 6 still are not organized, and Sector 6 especially is in mass turmoil. Texas has offered numerous times to occupy Sector 4, but each time they are met with rejection. Eventually, Texas just decides to invade Sector 4, which doesn't take very long. Almost a year after the decree, in September 2058, Sector 6 still has not organized, and NUSA occupies it, placing it under martial law in order to subdue the rampant crime and violence there. This does not last very long, because in 2063, NUSA signs the Louisville Agreement with Ohio up north, which we'll get to in a bit. Basically, what happens is that Noosa gives up land to Ohio in exchange for control of a stretch of the Appalachian Mountains. 2 years after the Louisville Agreement comes the Austin Agreement between Texas and Mexico, in which the former Sector 5, which has been especially rowdy the last few years, is given to Mexico for some unspecified amount of money that Texas immediately begins investing in a formidable military force. The next 5 years are relatively uneventful in the Southeast, but in 2070, tensions within Noosa reach a breaking point. The new states have had a really tough time with poverty and violence, especially racial violence, these past several years, and none other than a pseudo communist party has risen up in the South. In 2070, the communists finally reach a majority in the unicameral Nusian Senate, and the new majority leader, Randy Touleraine, calls for the implementation of his party's agenda at whatever cost. Summed up, the Nusian Communist Party wishes to bring back the old days of Southern planter culture, including an institution known as restricted serfdom that is basically slavery in everything but name. The only difference between the old 19th century planter culture and this new 21st century planter culture is that there is no aristocratic class anymore. These communists want to distribute the farmland to everyone as equally as they can, so the only real Southern aristocracy is just anyone who happens to be white and male. This aggressively racist and misogynistic agenda is not appreciated by everyone in the new states, obviously, so intense fighting breaks out in May 2070, eventually leading to full-blown civil war. After 3 years, the communists deal a death blow to their mostly patriot opponents in the Battle of Montgomery on July 3, 2073. The Nusian Civil War ends, and the People's Republic of Nusa is formed, with Randy Touleraine as its premier. The last thing that happens in the Southeast before the turn of the century is that, on December 2nd, 2098, Premier Touleraine dies. He is replaced by the even more radical Noah Williams, his protege, who implements several increasingly anti-female laws that undo all the progress the various feminist movements managed to make. Alright, now that we have the Southeast done, we can move on to the West. Starting over back in 2057, we get some action right off the bat. The Provisional Western Authority, headed by Vice President Palmer, collapses almost immediately. Many of the major cities of the West declare independence and begin to subjugate their surroundings, both peacefully and forcefully. The most notable would probably be Denver, Salt Lake City, and Seattle. There are others, but these are the big three. Why didn't the state government step in? Well, the PWA dissolved all the state governments until something could be done about them, and most of that land out there is pretty sparsely populated anyway, so it would be a lot of trouble to hold on to it. Could you imagine Wyoming trying to keep control of that rectangle of land all on its own? Wyoming hardly exists as it is. 2 days after the decree, things get a little weird. Two workers in a nuclear silo somewhere in the western US get to talking about current events and how it seems like the world is going to crap. And they also happen to have a lot of alcoholic beverages with them. Their nihilistic overtones take hold, and next thing you know, Las Vegas is wiped off the map. While that's happening, though, Hawaii reorganizes into an independent republic, so that's cool. Remember that company that created the smallpox vaccine back in 2054, Stylix? I told you to keep them in mind, because this is when they come back into the spotlight. Like I said, they're a big company, providing amenities for basically every part of life. On October 30th, they make an offer to the people of the West Coast states. Allow us to rule over you and protect you from the lawless West in exchange for taxes, and we might possibly draft you in the event of war. Sound good? Cool. Thanks for the land. The people of California, Oregon, and Reno gladly accept, and Stylix becomes one of the world's largest economies overnight. Washington is less eager, however, because they're still holding out for the Olympic Republic, or just hoping Canada will come in to save the day. Speaking of Canada, they have not been standing idly by. They've been making some moves, slowly creeping into former American land with a touch of animosity for their southern neighbors. They begin invading the Olympic Republic on October 4th, 2062, after a breakdown in relations. Seattle doesn't stand a chance, and finally gives in on December 28th. The last big thing that happens in the West before 2100 is the Vancouver Treaty, an agreement between Canada and Mexico that demarcates their allotted land Treaty of Tordesillas style at the 39th parallel north. I know that was a lot, so I'm going to stop the video here. Next episode, we're going to find out what happens in the Northeast, because it turns into a mess up there very quickly. Until then, I'm going to enjoy the rest of my spring break, and if you're still on yours, I hope you enjoy yours too. You know where to leave any questions and comments. I'll see you all in the next one.